Morning, this is Dr. Mike Carberry. I'm here with Dr. John Rosa, my good friend from Baltimore, but also formerly from the New York area at the New York Chiropractic College. And now you're very much involved in Washington, D.C., and helping to try to stem the tide of the opioid crisis. So welcome back.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Always good to be with you, my friend.
Yeah. So for our listeners who may not recognize you or know who you are, you're on a panel in Washington, D.C. Why don't you tell our listeners what that panel is?
Well, I'm a surrogate to the opioid task force for the White House, which then led into consulting for the Department of Justice, the DEA, Homeland Security, a lot of police forces, and then 3 or 4 other states that the governors were trying to get some of the information. So I'm siloed. So when we look at the surrogate team at the White House, there are 142, I think, of surrogates, and they're siloed into their respective expertise. So I'm siloed into the integrative medicine or prevention piece, and then there's law enforcement, behavioral medicine, hospital medicine, um, media. We have the media piece of getting messaging out. So they're national experts that will give guidance to what they either speak about, policy, and things that they want to take care of. So sometimes it's actually listening to us when we go in to give our expert opinion, and sometimes I think that they want us there to say, "Here's what we did," and we talked to some people about it. You know?
Right. Are you the only chiropractor?
I'm the only chiropractor on the team. Yeah, yeah.
How about that? Okay.
It's fun. I mean, it
Well,
really getting that message out. It makes a difference. Somebody has to shake that cage in those rooms because the message gets watered down. You know, when we talk about prevention in those meetings, and the prevention conversation is beating their chests about Narcan and how we distributed 486% more Narcan over the course of 2018, and that's prevention to them. And I'm the one who stands up and says, you know what? If you don't want to talk about prevention, I'll just leave. Because preventing death is great. We need that. But preventing the problem is really more important. So
yeah, it's like where's the start line? Is it actually when they're having the overdose, or is it before they started taking the drugs?
right, well, just like everything, and rightfully so, I'm not going to say this isn't important because when the house is on fire, you're not taking a bucket of water. You better have a few hoses that are just running things out. So to get the flames to shut down. So our real fire is that people are dying, 160 people every single day. I understand why they want the stuff sent out and that Narcan made available in any drugstore you have. It's in any home that if there's a prescription given, it's in anybody who's using in their hands and their buddy who they use with's hands. And I see it, I get it, I understand it. But we really have to keep this conversation going about why we should never have been in that place and what do we do to prevent that thing from ever start. And that's kind of my
Right.
role.
I like the example you gave at our convention where you see people floating down the stream in trouble, and you're with
Yeah,
two medical doctors, and they're saying, let's save these people, and they're jumping in the water to save them, throwing life preservers out, and you go, I'm going to go up and find out why all these people are ending up in the stream.
right.
And
And
when you,
at one of the conferences, it really was like, because I got upset when the conversations 45 minutes into an hour and a half meeting, all they talked about was Narcan. So I gave them that example. I'm like, look, you have to go as far upstream as you possibly can. You have to find other people who jump in it.
let's
So,
talk about that upstream problem and some of the things that are coming out, because I mentioned this to you earlier. In just looking at the media, I start hearing people referring to back at the height of the opioid crisis as if we're already past it. And
yeah.
that's not really the case, is it?
Now, see, what's happening is, especially through government channels and through pharma channels, they want the messaging out there that we're getting ahead of this crisis. This is a 10-year unfolding before we get better. And I'll explain what's happening on the messaging. Is we're seeing a decrease in opioid pills by 20 to 30%. Now, if you notice what I just said is we have a decrease in opioid pills. We do not have a decrease in opioid prescriptions. So the prescriptions are being written for 7 to 12 days as opposed to 30, 60, and 90-day prescriptions. So the volume of pills has decreased, but the number of actual scripts being written hasn't changed. So it only takes 3 to 5 days for the right person to become dependent on that escaping feeling from a prescription. The same 7 and 12 days gets run out. Where do they go? Back for that next 7 and 12-day prescription because they tell the doctor that this really is helping them, regardless of whether the initial pain syndrome is there or no longer there. That's how they slide in. So they're not stopping the process. So the number of hospital visits and emergency rooms for reasons for drug-related issues has not changed. So also we're seeing that the number of deaths have decreased in the areas that are hardest hit. Well, when you increase 486% availability in NARC, and then you interview some of these people that have it and say, oh yeah, well now we use one at a time and we watch each other, and if everything's okay, the other guy could use, but so long as we have this in hand. So how much of what we're seeing in a slight decrease in the hardest hit areas is because we've made something available that prevents death. But we're not preventing the people escalating. If 80% of heroin users started with a prescription, and we're still giving prescriptions, we're still creating a heck of a lot of heroin users, which means ultimately with the increase in fentanyl and other illicit opioids that are being added to these products in the street, we're not stopping this epidemic from continuing. We're just adding it down. And talking points during periods, they're going to say, we're doing this. Look how much we helped this go to not. Yeah, but you know what? We're really not there. We're just a lot of doctors still think that it's just okay to prescribe for a low-level pain syndrome, chronic pain, subacute stuff, not what it's really made for, which is cancer pain, post-surgical crush injury, and very few long-lasting conditions that are very painful. There's so good right.
Well, I'm not going to plug it, but in my book, I have at least 2 chapters on this is The Death of American Healthcare by Dr. Mike Carberry, which is me. We have chapters on here about this opioid crisis and what you're talking about and how it came about. And it wasn't by accident. It was actually, there was a very slick plan starting back in the late 1990s on how to get this to be very commonly prescribed by almost everybody who could prescribe, right?
100%. But by the way, is unbelievable. Any doctor that wants to have a discussion with the patient base or have themselves lecture to a community locally to make them brand themselves as an expert should pick that book up and have a read about 17 times like I've read. It's really, you did a great job with it.
Thank you.
So when we talk about how the drug companies started with something that seemed to be pushing in a direction to get fifth vital sign and all the things we've heard about it, how they pushed it to go through. At the same time, we have these government agencies like FDA, CDC, the Office of National Drug Policy, the Drug Czar's office. We're talking about billions of dollars spent designed in offices to protect us from having some sort of drug that's put on the market from killing us.
Okay, so yeah, it's important that we look at how that whole thing came about, and you were just explaining that.
Yeah, one of the things that I get upset about is the billions of dollars that, like I said, spent by agencies to protect us. And you know, if 160 baby seals showed up on beaches across the country every day dead, there'd be $1 billion in advocacy groups and all kinds of stuff saying, oh my God, we have to find out what. Meanwhile, that many people go, and the government agencies meant to protect us had for so long turned a blind eye to the problem. When the FDA started, one of the doctors was looking at the thalidomide that was trying to be pushed into the United States market, and there was internally, it wasn't even really set up as an agency. And there was one doctor who said she just didn't think that there was enough evidence that it would do the right trick. And especially with pregnant women and what they were trying to use it for anxiety and other things. And so she kept pushing. And during her push to not have it come here, they started noticing all these birth defects in Europe and that are a result of the medication. Like 80% of the funding of the FDA comes from pharma that lends that, because they didn't have enough infrastructure to do it, so that the companies themselves said, "Oh, we'll pay, we'll sponsor any kind of research you want to do. So come on, that's inherent.
I know about 10 or 12 years ago, I read an article from, I think, the British Medical Journal or maybe Lancet, and they were talking about the FDA board who approves drugs is 80% pharmaceutical reps or pharmaceutical executives who are on leave from the pharmaceutical company but still own stock, and they have to sign hundreds of conflict of interest waivers a year. It's like letting the fox guard the henhouse. Yeah.
They actually had these closed door meetings with institutions like colleges and medical schools, pharmaceutical companies, and the FDA getting brought in to sit at the table. So they would hold these events all across the country. I think Baltimore was actually the first event they held. This is during the time when they were noticing upticks in dependency and addiction. And they were planning on how to reduce the amount of time to get a medication okayed for the FDA. So in those meetings, they come up with a way that selective enrollment to the study, which means that the FDA was allowing them to do the studies by weeding out people who would have had, if you had any family history of addiction or previous addiction, you were removed from the study. So
I've often wondered, did they ever do DNA testing to check the metabolism of that patient against that drug?
Yeah,
because I've heard they can weed people out that way.
Yep, you could wean them out by DNA testing for familial issues, and you could wean them out by just understanding who is this person in front of me that may have some underlying issues that the medication is going to make them escape from a reality they don't like, as opposed to its use to reduce pain. They don't screen through that process. Nowadays, I call them doorknob docs. With big systems buying up all these medical practices, these doorknob docs, they hold the door, they open it, they talk to the patient, say, okay, the nurse will be in to do an EKG, I'll rewrite your prescription, I'll see you when we need to, and click, the door closes. They have no idea what's going, like when I was growing up, I remember my doctor, I walk in and be like, hey, how your parents doing? What's your brother doing? Did he get into school when you were talking about, like, how's work? What, are you kidding me? Nothing. They don't understand who's in that room, so they don't know the underlying factors of what it could be when they write a script. Because you would prevent a lot of that by just knowing who's in front of you. It's a mess. A system that just...
I've talked to nurse practitioners that told me right out of school, they were offered big money to work in a practice and more than they would normally get. And when they got there, the doctors, it was a pain management clinic, were saying to the nurse practitioner, you write this guy a script, you write this guy a script, till it got to the point she realized she was writing all the scripts for the opioids, so that if they got a knock on the door, they were asking for her. And she quit. Her first question in the job interview was, you don't prescribe opioids, do you? And I said, absolutely not. She was like, oh, thank goodness. It's a crime. It's terrible.
And the majority of the old school people who were writing these scripts, they almost feel like, you can't tell me what to do. I'm a doctor, and I've been doing this forever, and I know what works. You can't tell me. Now, the newer generation of docs that are getting educated in colleges before they're out about the crisis and problem, almost mandating some of this education into institutions, then now switch. Because in the past, Purdue was in such a high number of medical schools across the country, especially in the Northeast, they were donating so much money, and in their money donated, they would plant in these instructors who would teach about pain management and why you needed to prescribe their medications for long-term chronic care use. So people were coming out thinking this is what we're supposed to do. Now,
the standard of care.
Yeah, the standard of care was to push it through. But how does a pharmaceutical company get to donate the money and plant in an instructor to talk about their product? It's just sanity.
That to me is a real crime, where they lead the doctors to believe that this is the standard of care to prescribe these drugs, and that's how they got it so widespread. I mean, we've come across podiatry practices rampantly just prescribing these drugs, dentists prescribing these drugs, medical doctors, family practitioners. It's terrible.
Well,
we do have
hear about these places that were the pill mills down in Florida, the Route 95 corridor, the Appalachian Trail, and these people making millions off of prescribing, having prescription pads signed already with a pile, and you pay $250 and get your script. You never saw the doctor. That's bad, I understand, but that's not where the crisis is really. Those are just bad hombres like we're going to have in any profession of any kind.
Right.
The problem was just the rampant overprescription by being duped by these companies saying that it was okay. The real heart that breaks is the doctors who went to bed at night and said, put their head on the pillow and said, I got 50 people out of pain today and slept like a baby. And now they go to bed saying, how many people did I put on a path to dying from an overdose? That's what I feel bad for, because they were duped by a system that told them, here's what you're supposed to do.
Well, where that original system started is with the AMA trying to portray that the goal is to control symptoms and get people out of pain. Pain is a natural part of the healing process, and I don't want people to suffer, and sometimes you need to do something to control pain. But writing an opioid prescription because you had a tooth pulled, I'm sorry, when you get a tooth pulled, you spend the day with ice on your face.
How in the hell are we 5% of the world's population or less and consume 90% of all the opioids made illicit or prescription?
Right.
You know, come on. I mean, the rest of the world has to have figured it out, just like everyone else for thousands of years, what you're supposed to do.
Right.
We just got this pill for every ill. Let's just write something for it.
Yeah.
I hope the tide seems to be changing. You know, it's an interesting fact, just briefly. So we're in a society point right now where it's at the tipping point of this integrated medicine model working so extremely well. So when you Google, should I take an opioid? Or if you Google back pain, or if you Google headache or neck pain, the medical doctor, the hospital, the urgent care doesn't show up until page 7. All the rest of the information is us, because we're putting such incredible content out there as to why you should never go down that path. So Dr. Google, who's the smartest person in the world, is now telling everybody, stay away. Even if you Google cholesterol medication, you don't see, here's why it's really great for you. You get the first page of like, stop, don't ever take this ever again. So we're in a place where society's getting, the millennial group population is being fed really good and sometimes crazy, but they can investigate some good information of why not. Where in the past, it was just, I believe anything the doctor tells me, I'm going to take this and I'm going to go home and I'm going to finish it. Like my mother gets 30 pills, Percocets for a pulled tooth. She'll finish it even though every time she takes one, she vomits because the doctor told her that's what she's supposed to do. We're getting away from that. And in some cases, it's a difficult thing to how to practice medicine. But in other cases, it's not such a bad thing. We're in a good spot. We're growing. We're being recognized. We're having government agencies tell everybody else that this is how you should practice with pain. You should send to integrative medicine before we prescribe anything. And now the Dr. Google is telling everybody, hey, you should go see these people first. So the time is, like, we're right there. And God bless you for what you do, because you get, it started at the tens and then it's at the hundreds and now it's at the thousands of people who show up, sit in a chair and listen to what we really should be doing in healthcare. And then you text things like crazy, and I can't wait to see what you do at your next convention, because
the reason we're doing this interview is you're gonna be there. Here's the problem, John. We have only 700 seats in this hotel.
Wow. Well,
we're limited to how many people can hear us.
Yeah.
So if people are thinking about going, now's the time to get your seats, because last time we had 1,000, and this time we're limited to 700. It's a great hotel. It's the Pendry Hotel in San Diego, and it's October 11th, and I think it's 11th to 12th, right, Jamie? Yeah. So you're going to be there. You're going to update us. Yeah. If you could just give us a little preview, because I know we talked about Washington, but you have another avenue to try to stem the tide of this crisis.
Overdose Free America is a nonprofit I started in 2018. It's designed for awareness, strictly awareness, because one of my pet peeves is with this crisis is that when people look at an addict, which I even hate that word, they look at them and say there's this moral compass issue of why they failed, and look what you're doing to yourself. And in my eyes of what I've researched, what I know, and now the deeper I get into this, with all the problems we just discussed of where this problem really came from, and now I look at them and I say, look what we did to you, not look what you did to yourself. Because society put these people in a bad place. So the messaging has to get understood. When 1 in 10 people seek help for addiction, that's why your death rates are so high, because they become so removed from society, so depressed, so suicidal, that the drug is, it's the next time. It's like the last time. And it's a title that I'm actually going to use for a song in a project that I'm using with the nonprofit, is The Last Time. Because in their brain, they always think, well, this is going to be the last time. I'm never going to do it again. And in the back of their head, it's like, but what if it is the last time? Like, if I don't make it through. So they're so tied up into that process so I started the nonprofit for messaging, and Hollywood and the music industry has gotten behind the concept, and we're building this project to have a movie trailer that never comes out by some of the hottest and most known directors in Hollywood, with some really A-list people that are going to be placed in there with some trickery that's going to really get things to be completely viral in its messaging. And then a song that goes, well, every good movie is a hit song, so there's this destigmatizing song that goes with it. So the movie trailer is like a conspiracy theory of where this really came from. And it tells the story so that everybody who sees it is going to be like, oh my God, I knew we had a problem, but it's not really their fault. That's what happened to make these people get to that spot. So the more we feel and are aware of it, and we look at it as somebody who has an addiction, and we say, we want to help you, or don't be afraid to go get help. Don't worry about the stigma you're in. There's plenty of people who understand. We're going to start seeing a lot of people not only be aware of why you should never start with this, but if you did, here's where you can get help. So the song and the movie, right, destigmatization, and it's going to be changing the course of this problem, unlike anything that's been done so far.
It's really a unique and appropriate way to handle this, because when you talk about America looking at these people as they did it to themselves, we do have to look at them a little bit as a victim, because I'll tell you, I went fishing in Oregon, and I went out with a guide, and it was a pretty fun day, and there was other people in the boat, and I got talking to this one woman who was on the fishing trip, and she was a prison guard for the state of Oregon. And she says, what's interesting about prison is the demographics in prison in the last 10 years have changed dramatically. And I said to her, what do you mean? She said, there are people in prison now who should have never, and you can look at them and say, this is not typical prison people. And I go, well, why'd they get there? And she said, opioids. I was like floored when she told me there are people in prison that are never been criminal had they never been prescribed an opioid. And it's just, she said, it's a real shame to see these people ending up in this situation that would have never gotten there 20 years ago or 30 years ago.
It's 100%. It's reeled across the country with that. There's good people made bad decisions, and sometimes those bad decisions were put upon them that they didn't realize it was a bad decision, and they get placed in a. Right. There's a book called Cherry that was written in federal prison by an Iraq war veteran who came back and had PTSD and pain. He was polymedicated with medication for PTSD, which are benzos, along with pain medication, which got ratcheted up till eventually he got so addicted to it, and they cut him off saying, you're taking too much, and he went to heroin. He robbed 14 banks to keep up his addiction. And when he robbed the bank, they would throw the money on the counter, and he would take just enough to fulfill his addiction and say, I'm sorry, and leave the rest and leave. So it became this crazy story. But then he writes this book saying, I belong in federal prison because I robbed 14 banks. But I was a dedicated soldier, and when I came back, is it really my fault that I was put in a position where my body told me, if you don't do this, you'll die? I had to do that. Is it really my fault? So it's a really compelling story. And that book, the rights to that book was just purchased by the Russo brothers, who were the directors and producers of the Avenger films and Marvel that just broke every record in movie history. They bought the rights to that book, and those guys are incredible. They're going to do the movie and tell that story. That's going to be a great message as well.
That'd be powerful. We need to hear that story, and we need to hear people like you. So coming up in October in San Diego, you're going to join us. More powerful information. You'll update all the doctors at the convention about the situation where we're at, and more information about what we're trying to do about it. and hopefully this tide starts to turn and we start to resort back to a healthy America, a less addicted America.
Yeah, very, very much. We help in that process too.
Good. Well, John, it's always good to talk to you. I'm glad to have you on our podcast here. Looking forward to October. Anything you want to add at the end?
No, just looking forward to it myself, and keep up the good work and get that book in people's hands, because it's a great tool. It's a tool of knowledge, and if you want to be an expert out there in your field and you're talking to people in government, the medical system, or just for your patients in general, it's nice to know how broken the system is and how we're trying to fix it. So,
got it.
Thanks for what you do.
Well, again, Dr. John Rosa, thank you for joining us. Looking forward to seeing you in October. Folks, thanks for tuning in. We'll see you in October.